Hello, I'm Dr. Pierre Simon, and it's wonderful being back with you as we continue in this series of Unmasking Addiction. Long series, a lot to talk about. We're going to go quickly today because, as usual, I write down too much and then I've got to go quickly to talk about it. But you'll be able to pause on occasion to read some of these things that we're talking about here, I'm sure. Unmasking relapse prevention is the area that we've been in, and this is part 11 of Unmasking relapse prevention. We've talked about 10 compromising warning signs. All of them are very interesting, and certainly there's a lot more. But today we're in the behavioral loss of control. What happens when there's a behavioral loss of control? Is that tends to be a facet of those who relapse when they're in the treatment and when they're in recovery after their initial series of treatment programs that they may go through. That lifetime recovery process that we have been talking about, what happens when they lose that behavioral control, that relapse occurs, or even just a lot of difficulty comes out of losing control. So behavioral loss of control is a warning sign, and we want to pay attention to it. And then, of course, there's many warning signs. Behavioral loss of control refers to the inability of an individual to manage their actions and behaviors, specifically those associated with substance abuse or addictive behaviors, despite their sincere desire to change. And you know as well as I do, even for folks who don't have addictive issues, well, I don't want to do that, so I'm not going to do it. But then, oh, well, okay, I'll do it. These little things give in, and you end up doing these things. But this is much more serious for those with an addictive personality, because those little losses of control can have big consequences. They're an obstacle to recovery. It manifests as recurrent relapses or the inability to maintain abstinence over time. This problem is a significant obstacle in addiction recovery, as it can lead to those repeated relapses. And when that occurs, what happens? Well, self-esteem drops, doesn't it? They feel worse about themselves. They begin to doubt their ability to continue or to do better, which tends to lead towards perhaps more disturbing events in the future. So it hinders the progress to sustain sobriety. And there's emotional implications of that behavioral loss of control. There's emotional distress, there's impulsivity, strained relationships will occur, physical health risks, and that's the obvious, isn't it? And certainly financial consequences. So we're going to talk a little bit about these implications that occur with the behavioral loss of control. And the first and most important, which always seems to be there for every case, is emotional distress. The emotions are so important in anything that we do. If we maintain level emotions, we do things better, don't we? If we don't, well, we're not functioning at 100% if our emotions are clouding our judgment, making it difficult to think, to feel, to do. Emotional distress is a mental and emotional response to a situation or event that causes significant mental or emotional suffering or harm. So in other words, it's not just normal emotions. We all have that. But emotional distress goes beyond normal emotions to where there's a sense of suffering and harm occurring in the midst of that emotional distress. Distressful emotions will often increase impulsivity and lower self-control, making one susceptible to partaking in addictive behaviors or escapism. Somebody gets too emotional, they're not going to think through, they're going to become more impulsive, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and they're going to carry out with what they feel like doing, and inevitably consequences are going to come from that. So emotional distress has symptoms. There's anxiety and constant worry, depression and prolonged sadness, feeling overwhelmed. I felt a little overwhelmed last week because I've got to have cataract surgery, and so I got to go to all these different doctors, and then this doctor wants you to see that doctor, and they want clearance from this and that. And boy, I went, oh, I'm overwhelmed. I need to settle down. So I had to cut back a few appointments, cut back a few things to settle down because it was just too much to do. Well, that's normal, isn't it, for all of us when you got all this stuff going on, but you're able to problem solve it and carry it out. In addictions, or if someone has an addictive personality, they have to be very careful with those little things that can occur, that can overwhelm them, which is going to bring about emotional distress, bringing back up from the past all those reminders. Sleep disturbances will occur as emotional distress symptom. Physical symptoms like headaches and digestive issues, changes in appetite, social withdrawal, irritability, mood swings. That's a big one, because when we start noticing someone is not being their normal self and they're much more irritable, or you see these swings of ups and downs in their moods, pay attention. Something's going on there. Now, you don't have to fix them, but you can help them to pay attention to themselves by saying, would you like to talk about it? Is there something you're upset with? Or have you noticed you've been getting a little irritable lately? You want to talk about it? Or is there something I can help you with regarding that? That's the best thing you can do. They have to be willing to cooperate and talk about those things. And a lot of times just talking about something releases the pressure from inside. When that pressure is released, okay, I feel better now. You don't have to give them answers, solutions, detailed things on what to do next. Just be a good listener at those times. Reduced cognitive functioning, such as concentration and memory, is another set of symptoms that occur during these times. And of course, that constant impulsivity or increased impulsivity. If you lose self-control, you realize you need it. If you have it, you don't pay attention to it, and you're not afraid of losing it. So pay attention. Be grateful that you have that self-control, and it helps you to notice a little bit more if you're losing it. Okay, I need to regain that self-control. There's an additional factor that exacerbates the loss of self-control. It's not just these things that we're talking about here, but the other aspect that kind of makes it worse is that sense of being alone, loneliness, that loss of connection with others. And certainly some people are loners and they really don't need a lot of people. They need at least one. And sometimes that one might even be an animal, a dog, a cat, a bird, something. And if they lose that something, they lose control. And they know it. And so they focus more to cling to whatever that something is, which can push people away. So where do you feel satisfied? Do you feel satisfied in your security, in your significance? Identity becomes very important with that loneliness factor. Many people might not feel lonely as long as they're part of a group, yet their emotional well-being is still precarious because that group externally defines their sense of self. So important for you parents out there. Help build your child's identity in the home. It starts early. If you give them an identity, a healthy identity, when they go out there, they're less inclined to find another identity through the groups or the other activities or whatever. They already have an identity. They already know who they are. They can stand on their own 2 feet and participate with these other groups and activities in a healthy way, but also have those healthy boundaries to know, wait a minute, this isn't right. This isn't part of who I am. I'm not going to take part in that. We start that at home with our children. And if you're not doing that at home with your child, all right, they're not going to form their identity. They're going to go out there and they're going to find it elsewhere. Consequently, when faced with the allure of reverting to past behaviors, the emotional turmoil can amplify, leading to the misguided belief that returning to a previous addictive cycle will improve one's life. Now we talk about impulsivity as part of this loss of control. I'm always thinking about impulsivity because when I go to the grocery store, I think before I get to the checkout line, don't buy anything at the checkout line. That's the impulsive buying area. They want you, and that's why it's there and all that. Yeah, I always do buy something. There's something there. Oh, and then afterwards, I feel bad about it. But I think ahead of time, okay, restrain yourself, have that self-control. Impulsivity is a mental and emotional construct characterized by actions without forethought, often leading to negative consequences. So without forethought, without thinking ahead, there's impulsivity. So it's always good to think ahead. You walk out your door, don't just walk out your door in the mornings, think ahead. All right, I'm gonna walk out the door, I'm gonna look around, check my surroundings and get to my car. I'm going to look at the tires. I'm going to make sure everything's okay before I get in the car and get it started and get going. So, thinking ahead. But if I'm impulsive, I just do it. And before you know it, I'm tripping over the box that the delivery guy left at the door. I'm missing the fact that it's raining or that there's somebody standing right in the sidewalk in front of the driveway that I need to be careful of. I mean, you miss all those things if you're impulsive. Think through. Pay attention. It plays a significant role in the loss of self-control when you're impulsive, and the initiation and perpetuation of addictive behaviors will develop as a result of it. It's a feel-good that you want to repeat when you are impulsive. A surge of dopamine. So we're talking about the brain here. It's not just being impulsive. There's a action and reaction that occurs in the brain. Dopamine, which is the same neurotransmitting chemical that makes you feel good, along with those other feel-good chemicals, they start to secrete even when you're impulsive. You don't have to take a drug. Just, I'm going to buy this candy on the checkout line. Oh, got the candy. Or I'm going to buy this magazine. Oh, yeah. What is that little That's the dopamine. Just a little bit gets secreted, a little feel good. Oh, yeah. Hey, you keep repeating that feel good, you want more. Yeah. So a surge of dopamine levels can provide immediate gratification, making impulsive decisions to seek out addictive substances and behaviors, more attractive. Yeah. Before you know it, you start looking forward to what's at the checkout line. The impulsive pathway model posits that impulsivity can lead to development of addiction via increasing pattern of poor behavior. One time is one thing. 2 times it enhances it. 3 times it becomes a repetitive behavior without you even realizing it. It's pleasure without conscience that changes the brain. The immediate rewards of indulging in addictive behavior often overshadow the long-term consequences, the long-term negative consequences, particularly for impulsive individuals. So some people are just not naturally impulsive, but if they have an addictive personality, they're inclined towards it, so they become that way, or They may have ADHD. They may have extroversion. Just being an extrovert will tend to make you more impulsive. This leads to a cycle where impulsivity and addiction reinforce one another, making disengagement increasingly tricky. The addiction often exacerbates impulsivity by altering neural pathways, further entrapping the individual. Changes the brain. Impulsivity changes the brain. We want to change the brain in healthy ways, not unhealthy ways. The third facet of loss of control is strained relationships. That's always there. It's an obvious thing, but if we pay more attention to it, sometimes it helps give us more self-control to not say or do things that could strain our relationships. The issue of repeated addiction relapses are often there. Their behavioral loss of control, they extend beyond the individual, so they're affecting others around the individual. They harm the delicate balance that's there between family and friends and coworkers and employers and so on. It harms it profoundly. What loneliness is more lonely than distrust? Because when there's broken relationships or damaged relationships due to loss of control, there's distrust. Trust erosion is perhaps the most glaring and immediate, starting with that emotional consequence that comes about from loss of control. Family and friends who witness a loved one consistently relapsing into addiction often find it increasingly difficult to maintain trust, leading to irreconcilable relationships. You've heard me speak in the past of when I used to work in the psychiatric unit many years ago when I started in the field of counseling. We had an adult unit, psychiatric unit, an addictions unit, substance abuse unit, and an adolescent unit. And I worked all three units in the psychiatric facility. But I'd often hear from the substance people how they were so afraid of their broken relationships, the loss of relationships, or going home and feeling that no one will trust them again. That was a big issue. And many of them would relapse almost immediately because that was the predominant thought that they would have when they would leave after, it used to be they would be in there 90 days, then the insurances dropped it to 60 days, and then it was 28 days. The last time I worked in psychiatric unit where the insurances would cover it. 28 days they leave, and well, they're expecting everybody to trust them. They're different now. They're better now. They're not the same person as far as they're concerned, but everyone sees them as that same person before they had entered into the psychiatric unit or the substance abuse unit. And so they need time to build trust. But in that time period to build trust, the individual is feeling empty, abandoned, rejected, shamed, invalidated, guilt. Now they want to escape. And the impulsivity gets stronger, and off they go, and they relapse and back into whatever programs they may be in. How do you maintain trust when there's behavioral loss of control? And what I often hear in counseling over the years from spouses who come in, or couples who come in where one might be a recovering addict or has relapsed and the other one says, I can't take this anymore. That's it. I've had enough. It doesn't have to be from addictions. It can be behavioral issues. It can be other issues. And that spouse just says, I've had enough. They can't trust anymore. They've lost that ability. So behavioral loss of control leading to addiction relapse will compel each family member to face unmet developmental needs. When I say that, I mean, we're all growing. My entire lifetime is a lifetime of growth. I'm never going to be at a point of perfection. I'm constantly learning and maturing. You are too. We all are. If there's a weakness, that's lagging behind. And if it's lagging behind, then I need to work on it. It becomes an unmet developmental need that makes me more susceptible in other areas. When there's distrust and broken relationships, it causes that family member, who may be a wonderful person and with no addiction issues, to face those weaknesses that they have. And suddenly now they're overwhelmed not only with their partner or family member who has just relapsed, but now they're having to deal with their own issues. And this often occurs where perhaps someone has come out of trauma in childhood and they've done very well for themselves, but now the partner has relapsed. Out comes the distrust, out comes the fears, out comes the pain and the agony from those reminders, adding to the difficulty in handling the present situation. So it forces the family member to face unmet developmental needs, impaired attachment, economic hardship. They got to face those things. Those things become bigger. They expand when someone has relapsed. Legal problems, of course, emotional distress, and some cases violence even. Well, the fourth facet that we're talking about in behavioral loss of control is physical health. And again, that's an obvious one. Because of the behavioral loss of self-control, repeated addiction relapses, what's it going to do? It's going to break down the body more. So it poses more significant risk to the physical health of the person working on their recovery, as well as everybody else around them. But if it's going to break down that physical health, each time they're going to get worse. Each time the body's going to break down a little bit more. It's not just a one-time thing. It's like if you constantly catch a cold. A cold isn't a big deal, but if you're constantly catching a cold, your immune system decreases. You become more susceptible to those germs and whatever else that might trigger the cold. And so you cause a cycle of colds that can become more intense, turning into pneumonia or something else. It's not much different here when there's this loss of control that tears down the body each time, bringing you to a place of susceptibility to other medical problems. Most overdoses, for example, aren't intentional, neither is liver disease. But among the common physical and medical risks of loss of behavioral control are overdoses or liver damage. Cardiovascular problems, stimulant abuse can lead to heart issues, irregular heartbeats, increased risk of heart attack. Respiratory issues can occur. The misuse of opiates can depress the respiratory system, causing slow and irregular breathing, which in severe cases can lead to death, along with whatever other things that may come out of that. Immunosuppression. Substance abuse can weaken the immune system, making it more susceptible to infections. Gastrointestinal issues will occur. Alcohol, as well as other drugs, can disrupt the gastrointestinal tract, your digestive system, leading to problems like ulcers or gastritis, or many other problems can come about as a result of that. So each relapse damages the body. Then there's financial consequences is the last area of loss of control, another obvious one, but they don't think about that in advance. They're acting impulsively. They're giving up, they're escaping, they're not thinking through the consequences. And financial consequences are important, especially when the finances aren't there. Understanding the financial burdens associated with addiction relapse can be crucial in framing effective interventions and offering a nuanced perspective on the severity of the problem. There'll never be enough money. Even if you're not an addict, or you don't have an addictive personality, or you don't have all these issues going on and all that, there's never enough money, is there? The more money you earn, the more you end up spending. Oh, there's not enough, we got to make more money. The most immediate financial burden resulting from relapse is the cost of the substance itself. Well, what do you expect? It's going to cost you more. So whatever you're making now, whatever you're living on now, if you relapse, where's that extra income going to come from? Because it's going to cost you more. You're going to have to buy those things, whether it's marijuana or whether it's an opiate or something else. It's going to cost you more money. Something on this end isn't going to get paid because now you're taking that money to put it on this end. That's going to create more troubles. Whether it's alcohol, narcotics, or prescription medication, the financial implications can be crippling to a family, especially if they're just barely making ends meet. For instance, a study from the McAllister group found that individuals addicted to narcotics can spend upwards of $10,000 a year solely on acquiring the substance. Now, I laughed when I saw this $10,000. It's very low, and I don't know the details of. I haven't read I read the abstract on this, and I didn't read the entire paper. But $10,000 is minimal. We could say that's the group of cannabis users out there who are buying cannabis in the year, and that's going to be about $10,000. All the others, it's going to be much higher than that. In fact, over the years, I've had many individuals in recovery who had $1,000 a day habits. $1,000 a day. How do you make $1,000 a day when you're an addict? Well, you steal, you prostitute yourself, you do whatever you can to get what you can to service your addictive needs. $1,000 a day, that's a lot. And again, it's never enough. So no matter how much money you may have, it's never going to be enough. Many individuals require medical intervention for detoxification, medication, emergency services. It's just going to follow the relapse. These things are going to occur, one thing after another. According to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, substance abuse costs the American healthcare system more than $740 billion annually. To you and me, those figures are just kind of, they kind of go in one ear and out the other because it's so much we can't even comprehend it. But it is an awful lot when you realize 740 billion. So how many stars are there in the universe? How many stars can we see? It's just too much to comprehend. Don't stop counting. The toll continues to rise. Whatever the cost, it's going to continue to rise. Relapses often lead to legal issues such as DUIs, public intoxication charges, possession charges, which incur legal fees and fines. I'm bringing all this stuff up because you may need to bring this stuff up to your husband or your wife or your child in helping them to think more about the costs of what they're doing. According to the American Addiction Centers, legal costs can range from as few as hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars. Holistic counseling is an approach where in Christian counseling, we look at the spirit, soul, and body. So we're not just addressing one part of the person. In clinical Christian counseling, it's essential to provide holistic support. And so, I believe as well in all types of counseling, and in particular addictive counseling, holistic approach is the only thing that works the best. It addresses the spiritual, the mental and emotional. It addresses the body as well with referrals to the medical doctor. It's evidence-based strategies. And these strategies are needed for not only treatment, but sustained recovery. Individualized treatment plans become important, and it's an important facet of holistic recovery. Those recognizing that you're different than this other person. Each of you have uniqueness about you that may not do well with a particular treatment plan or treatment model as others may do well with. So you may have to make adjustments for each one. Relapse prevention, teaching individuals to identify and cope with triggers that are effective. So a trigger for this person may not be a trigger for this person, and so you have to address them differently. That's the holistic approach. Supportive community, encouraging participation in secular and faith-based support groups, and helping that sense of belonging, but also in helping to build that identity that they've lost or never had. Perhaps that identity has become attached to the addiction, and now they need to dissociate from that identity and become or form and develop a new identity. Mental health assessments as well, because there's co-occurring things, dual diagnosis, for example, where, well, okay, someone might have bipolar or major depression or schizophrenia or other issues where they've self-medicated with the addiction. Now they have to not only go to treatment for the addiction, but to stay in recovery, they're going to need treatment for these other things also. Spiritual guidance becomes very important as well as part of holistic treatment in preventing that loss of control. So incorporating Christian counseling principles to provide spiritual healing and insight uses that ability to build their identity in a healthy way, but in a way where they're not feeling so alone. Now there's a spiritual attachment, a spiritual bond that occurs, which helps create empowerment. It's not just power. As a Christian, for example, when I believe in Jesus Christ and I'm filled with the Holy Spirit, as the Bible tells us, so hey, there's power there, it says. The word power also means passion. When you're filled with the Spirit of God, when you're believing in that, or when you're believing in anything, what happens? Passion comes into you. If you're believing in addiction, passion comes in, and you're much more passionate about that addiction. As a believer, passion comes in as well, and causing an added force in helping you to get through whatever it is that you wouldn't normally be able to get through on your own. Pay attention to those tiny miracles. Regular monitoring becomes important, so implement a system of monitoring progress for yourself or for others. Family involvement becomes important as well. Well, what does the Bible say about all this? In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 12 to 13 in the Remedy Bible, which is a paraphrase Bible, it says this: so if you are in God's treatment program and believe you're doing well, be careful that you don't fall behind in your appointments with God or in the partaking of the remedy. For there's no temptation to discontinue God's treatment that has come upon you except for the fear and selfishness that infects all mankind. God is reliable and trustworthy. He'll not allow temptation beyond your ability to resist. But when you're tempted, He'll always provide resources, options, opportunities, supports, and alternate ways out so that you can stand your ground and overcome the temptation, thereby growing stronger with each victory. It works. Well, next time we're going to take the next step in identifying the warning signs. We're looking at loss of control today. Next time we're going to look at loss of control and recognize some more of those facets within it, that in the detailed inabilities that occur there. So I'm sure it'll be interesting as we follow up with this. May your troubles be minor, blessings more, and happiness come through your door. God bless. See you next time.